Fantastic. Oh, hold on. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I appreciate your all's time. My name is Kurt Bolton, as it says on the slide, and I have the pleasure of working for Huber Engineered Woods. We're the proud makers of Advantech Subfloor and the Zip system. You're probably familiar with those names. Today, I'd like to just take a little bit of time to talk about how you can drive success in the construction industry through the use of innovation in building sciences. This is something I personally am very passionate about. Pretty much every organization I've worked for during my 20-year tenure in the construction industry has been what I would refer to as a value add company, meaning they were doing something with disruptive technologies that were pushing innovation to try and drive quality to the end users, to the customers, to the applicators, in the hopes of sort of improving the general state of the building industry. It's really cool to work for a company that feels and thinks the same way. It's a great place to work. Huber Engineered Woods takes sort of it's not a unique, but it's I think a very special way of rolling out products. I want to kind of introduce that with an anecdote, if I can. And that is, I want to talk about the history a little bit of Huber just for a second. And I promise this will make sense in a minute. Huber's an old company. J.M. Huber Corp is almost 140 years old. The division I work for, Huber Engineered Woods, is a younger subdivision. It's about 40 years old. And when we first got started, we were just making OSB, just regular plain Jane, nothing special, Me Too product, OSB. And after a little while, the parent organization, J.M. Huber Corp, came to them and said, look, there's nothing wrong with the product you're making, but there's also nothing special about it. And we don't want to be just another commoditized Me Too product. Inevitably, in those kinds of offerings, what happens is there's a race to the bottom in price. There's no innovation. There's no added value to the customer. And everyone, even the people that win those fights, end up losing because their product doesn't have a whole lot of value. So look, take some time, figure out what you can do to drive value to the customer, or we're just going to, if we can't do that, then we're going to divest ourselves of the HEW brand, and they're going to sell off the assets. So the engineers, who didn't want to leave the company, put their heads together and decided to figure out how they could drive value to the customers. So if you're going to do that, the first thing to do is to figure out what are the problems that your customers are facing in that particular time frame. So something had been going on pretty much since PS2 standard was introduced, since plywood and OSB were created, was all the resins were water soluble. So you would install a subfloor deck, and then it would be rained on and snowed on during the construction process. And that precipitation would effectively rinse all of the resins, or at least a significant portion of the resins, out of the board. And you'd end up with delamination. With OSB, you'd have boards that disintegrated. And this is a pervasive problem. It was everywhere across the country. Anywhere that had precipitation had this problem. And everyone had accepted it. I mean, plywood and OSB were introduced after the Second World War as standard construction materials. So this had been around for a while. People have been dealing with this problem for a very long time, and no one had come up with a solution for it. And the reason for that was the resins that you would need to use if you were going to solve this problem are very difficult to work with in the manufacturing process. The same things that make them very durable in the field and great for construction make them very hard to work with when you're trying to make the board. So the engineers sat down and tried to figure out how they could use a hydrophobic resin, something that wasn't going to take on a lot of water and get rinsed out of the board, into the product during the manufacturing process. And that's how Advantech came to be. So this methodology for product introduction is something that Huber took from its very early days and has continued through to the present. When we launch a product, the product is in response to a specific need that we're seeing in the industry. We'll look and see what the most common problems people are having are, and then we'll design a solution for those. And then once we launch a product, we will take that product and go around and try and find the people who are having this problem so we can help them solve it. And I think this, to a limited extent, has applicability for the builder to their customers as well. So if you wanted to look at what the current issues are, things that are solvable, ways you can drive value to your customers, you probably would look at what are customers complaining about. J.D. Power and Associates did a study a number of years ago where they looked at these are the callback issues that homeowners are having today, and they ranked them by frequency of issues, severity of problem, things of that nature. So if we look at them, and we sort of categorize them out, and then we try and sort of group them into scopes of work. There are two really big ones. The number one single item is air infiltration into the envelope, but if you link that together with the moisture issues, basically the exterior skin of the building leaking, it becomes a really pervasive problem. Like, it's not just one issue, it's multiple issues that all stack up, that are all in that top 10. There's also a second set of issues that are very pervasive, which is the subfloor assembly squeaks and things having to do with the subfloor assembly squeak. So Huber's taken a look at both of these, and they've sort of designed products to help solve these problems. So we're gonna just run through a couple of them real quick. So if you wanted to figure out how to solve the subfloor squeak problem, you first would have to understand why the subfloor squeaks. And probably everyone here knows why they squeak. Basically, it's two pieces of the subfloor assembly are rubbing together because they're not bonded together in the subfloor when someone walks across it. So if you're going to fix this, the failure point is that bonding agent. It's the glue, right? If the glue is improperly installed, if it doesn't get the chance to bond effectively, then those boards, every time someone walks across them, are just going to rub up against each other. There's nothing inherently wrong with construction adhesive in the factory or in the lab. The problem is that it doesn't actually deal very well with the conditions that are in the field. It won't bond to wet wood effectively. It won't bond particularly well when it's cold out. Winter installations are going to be particularly susceptible to squeaks. It's hard to apply evenly. It comes out in clumps and voids if you look at the top of the joist. And so what ends up happening is this laundry list of issues that people have during the installation process in the field, in the real world, end up translating to that list that you saw earlier, where people see a lot of squeaks in their houses. So if you want to solve it, the glue to panel, bond, that joist to panel bond, is what you want to solve. So what does it cost to fix this, right? What does it cost to not fix it? One of the ideas I kind of want to keep coming back to today is, what is the true cost of construction for any particular scope, right? So you have your initially contracted value, the amount of money that you've agreed with your subcontractors and suppliers you're going to pay for a particular piece of work. But then you also have sort of the carrying cost or overhead. If the job takes longer because of a particular design decision, that carrying cost has implications as well. And if you have to go back and fix a problem, all the cost of fixing a problem, especially if it's something you have to fix regularly, should also sort of be evaluated as being underneath what the true cost of construction is. So if we're going to take that idea and we're going to apply it to the subfloor, we have a lot of builders we've sort of gone through this math with: big builders, little builders, everyone in between. The average builder is paying somewhere between $250 and $500 per house to remediate a squeak in the subfloor. Now, that is true if the squeak is found and fixed prior to any finishes being applied, prior to someone moving into the house. As soon as you start applying finishes over the top of the subfloor assembly, it gets a lot more expensive to get at that problem to fix it. And you're starting to look at, potentially thousands of dollars to fix these problems. And if it makes it all the way to when the homeowner's in there, you might have to put them up in hotels. You have to move furniture around. I mean, it can get really, really expensive. So the question is, how much would it cost to solve this problem ahead of time? And the answer is, it wouldn't really cost any more than just what the average remediation costs are if you catch it in that first bracket before anything gets put down. So if this is happening on most houses, and we have a lot of large builders in this market, that we've been told this is a problem that they've had on like almost every single house that they built over a period of time. So if you want to solve the problem, you need three things. You need a good joist system, you need a good panel, and you need a good glue that are all going to actually work together in a real world application. So in reality, dimensional lumber is kind of hard. Most people aren't using dimensional lumber. Most people use Oprah web trusses and I-joists. They have a good, reliable camber, and they have the stiffness that you need for it. A lot of people are using sort of a mid-tier panel, which can be good, but you're going to need something that's really going to keep water out during the installation process. It's going to live through the whole construction cycle. Something like Advantech that uses a lot of hydrophobic resins is preferable. But also, you're going to want a better glue. You're going to want a glue that can survive in a real world application. We would suggest something that's polyurethane based. polyurethane-based adhesives have a wider temperature range that can be applied over wet lumber. A lot of the issues that trip up traditional caulk tube type glue gun products don't really apply when you have a pressurized foam that works really well. So if you were to use something like it, if you use an Advantech and you were going to use an Advantech subfloor adhesive specifically, you also get like a squeak-free guarantee that comes along with the system. So for basically the cost of what it would be to remediate your early day squeak problem, you get a coverage, warranty-wise, for everything that takes place from there downstream, for anything that's going to come in later on in the process. And you're going to get something that's not going to have as many issues. It's going to be a lot more reliable. We've had builders that have used this in some markets where they would have $300 a house set aside to remediate every single home they went into. And when they switched to our subfloor adhesive and to our panels, they were able to completely remove that. That solved their issue. So let's go back to that list real quick. We'll take on one more of these. I won't keep you all day going through all of them. But the second issue is basically moisture and air infiltration into the envelope. So how is that happening? Basically, there's a failure in the WRB system. The weather resistant barrier isn't keeping the air out, or it isn't keeping the moisture out. And the reason for this typically is just the complexities of the installation process. You have multiple subs, you have multiple products. There are compatibility issues, there are detail issues. There's a lot of places where something has to be done that's very complex that relies on several subs talking to each other. And that's possible, but hard to accomplish. And so the result is that one of the most common problems that builders face from a callback perspective is that air and moisture get into the buildings and the windows leak. These are just some examples of installation practices that may not be super reliable for the long-term durability of the weather envelope. In addition to all of that and the customer callbacks, there's been code changes that have come along where people are having to adhere to increasingly tight standards for how tight the building is. And fixing those, especially after things go to drywall and finishes are starting to be put in, can really be expensive. So what is the cost, right? If you're using a system that is having these issues, there's a couple things we could look at. The first is almost everyone who's using a house wrap has acknowledged that there are limits to its air barrier properties, and so they'll include expensive caulk and seal packages in their construction. In addition, this all takes time. The house wrap takes significantly more time to install than weather barriers that are built onto the structural sheathing. And so there's carrying costs that are incurred just by having this construction process take additional days. There's opportunity cost of being able to finish more units. And if you just take those things, just the caulk and seal and the carrying, you're already paying for more than what you would have paid for if you were using a slightly higher priced initial system that had better long-term properties for being an air barrier and being a weather-resistant barrier. And that will guard you against failing blower door tests, and it'll help protect against mold problems and moisture intrusion into the envelope. I mean, remediation of mold and mildew, or just moisture intrusion into the envelope, is the single largest source of litigation dollars in the construction industry. So if you're already paying the money up front for the better system, but you're paying it in sort of like quick fixes and extra carrying time, you can help guard against all those long-term problems just by switching what you're paying for to being a better system that started out with. So something that's going to have better air barrier protection, that's going to help your customers not experience those things that are really driving callbacks and frustration, things that can affect social media presence, word of mouth, recommendations. You can solve all of that because you're already paying the money for it. You're just paying it in remediation later on down the road. What you could get is a product that is going to help drive value early days as part of your sales process, helping customers understand that you are building a better product, that you believe in building science, and you want them to be comfortable and happy in their home for years and years and years. It'll drive value during the process by being easier to work with, easier for subs to interface on complex flashing issues, and it'll drive value afterwards because it will be more comfortable for years and years, It'll be easier to pass blower door tests. You'll have less water infiltration, all of those, late stage problems that you're running into. So I know this is a lot, but just I want to reiterate, not everyone has all these problems on every house. Not everyone has these problems regularly. But what we want to try and get out there is these are problems that we see in the market, and we've designed products to be solutions for these problems. And we would love to chat with people about going through sort of the exercise of figuring out how to solve those problems with anyone. That being said, that's pretty much all I had notes-wise. I would love to field questions or answer anything, but I've also put my name, my phone number, my email up on the screen. I'm happy to answer these offline as well, whatever is more comfortable or convenient for you. Oh, it wasn't that good a presentation. There's got to be at least one question. Okay.
I guess it was that good of a presentation, Kurt.
Okay.
Well done, though. Very good.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Check out our landing page.
Hi, Curtis. This is Jude Burke with Elm Street. I don't have a question, but having used Zipwall on the last apartments we built, and all of them now, that's a terrific product. Really does save time and money in the long run.
We appreciate the endorsement, Jude. Thank you. We really appreciate it. If you ever need any help, we have, I do this stuff, obviously, but we also go out to job sites. We work with contractors. We really want to make sure that people get what they're paying for out of our products. So if there's any way we can help, early stage, late stage, anywhere in the process, please let us know. We would love to help.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Kurt, great job. Thanks so much for everything.
No worries. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a great week.
You too.